there's a phrase that I want to highlight that may not be completely familiar to everyone, which is purchasing power. And when I think about it myself, I'd been an investor for a long time. And I would go to, I'd see investment pitches or I'd go to a portfolio performance review, and never once is purchasing power mentioned. It's always some kind of pound return or dollar return or whatever the case might be. When you came across that discussion, did that really change the way you looked at things? And certainly from an engineer's perspective, like how you measure stuff, pretty important.
Absolutely.
Was that
I think
crucial? Yeah.
No, it is. And I mentioned before, like the debasement of your own time. You're booked on to do a 37.5-hour week. That's what your timesheet's supposed to say. You don't work 37.5 hours. You're working 40, 45, 50, whatever it is. Like your time just keeps increasing. Oh, it's just 2 hours here or there. Oh no, it's just Saturday morning or whatever it is. You got to get the job done. But you realize that you're only getting paid for 37.5 hours. If you're working 40, you're actually being paid less per hour. You are shrinking down your income. Now, on top of that, it's much worse in the last 4 years or so. But really, the price of everything just keeps going up. And if you think about it from the perspective of the thing that really clicked for me is that every person has their own inflation rate. What you and I buy is probably going to be different, right? So for me, what is my personal inflation rate? Well, part of it is going to be eggs and bread and milk and your daily groceries. But a very large part of it is, well, what do you actually want to buy? And for me, I want to buy a house. So therefore, what is your inflation rate? Well, my inflation rate is probably something in the order of about 10% a year. So if I'm not growing if I grow my purchasing power, whether by higher income, right? You go to your boss every year and you say, hey, I need a 10% raise. And they can say, well, sorry, the best I can do is 2%, 3%, which is very typical. And I remember having conversations with my engineering leads. And I said, I just finished a really big project. It was well delivered. And we had the conversation, right? It's like, hey, I would like to see if we can review the salary and start pushing it higher. And they basically said to me, look, you've just been promoted. So you're in kind of the lower bound of the grading range that you're in. Within each grading range, we have a band. You can be at the top band or, good performer or bad performer. And they go, the truth is we actually can't pay you more because otherwise it's going to be above the top band of your grade. You're already being paid at the maximum salary that we can do, right? So until you get promoted in the next 3 years and you start to realize, I can't grow my purchasing power. I actually cannot outrun the 10% inflation rate by just begging for a higher salary every year. So then you have to move into the world of investing and saying, well, the money that I do earn post-tax, I've then got to do something with that. Now I can go and spend it and buy shoes or buy lots of eggs, or I can actually invest it in a market and try and grow that into something else. You have to take risks to do so, but you need to find something that returns more than the inflation rate because otherwise you're trading water. You're not actually getting anywhere. I'm not getting closer to a house. I'm just saving in line with it. So every dollar that I earn, whether via investment or salary, the thing I want to buy got as expensive. So I'm flat. I haven't actually made any ground. And that's where purchasing power comes into the mix.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I was taught about inflation, but only in the nature of like inflation's good. And it's something that can be controlled with interest rates and that the central bank, don't worry, they've got your back. And Bitcoin does this amazing thing where it really makes you ask some very, very fundamental questions. Number one, what is money? Okay, well, that's a whole, separate discussion really. We could spend the whole podcast on that. But until you start thinking about the world through purchasing power, it's kind of like what I touched on earlier. It's like you're trying to, reduce fat, but you're not even looking at your calories, mate. You are literally wasting time. And I love that so much because it suddenly, you start to see things so much more clearly. That's good.